Damn. What's
we
up? What's
doing?
up? Another nursing debriefment coming in hot and heavy from the San Diego land area. Number 5 right here.
Number
San
5,
Diego,
work's
number
been
5.
pretty good. I feel like we finally adjusted. We're back to our norm. Work is decent. Schedules are still not aligned. But we're getting it done. Patient population is decent. It's not too acute. Even though I got my first swan in over a year and I had no idea how to operate it for the most part, but I kind of got a hold of doing the numbers and cardiac outputs, and it turned out to be a good learning experience for me.
Yeah, low-key, off orientation, I've only spent 1 day in the ICU off orientation. I've been floating to a step-down unit and also a Tele unit and also a med-surg unit since I came off orientation.
I'm 3 out of 5.
Out of 5. Yeah, in ICU,
Yeah, I worked 3 shifts.
then I'm like 1 out of 6. Which is a good experience because it's cool because ratios aren't anything crazy or anything like that, but it's different now that I haven't done ICU. I've been able to talk to all my patients.
Yeah, I worked on a tele floor and I had 3 patients. Luckily, we didn't go out of ratios, they would call it out here, and where I stay with 3 patients, I cannot complain one bit because I used to be in step-down unit, step-down ICU, PCCU, whatever you call it here. And I had up to 4 patients. And these patients were busy. Sometimes I had like a little drip like nitrogen for MIs. I think we didn't go over above 20 mics. Or you had somebody on like a nicardipine drip, somebody on BiPAP. So these patients were so much more acute versus here. I don't see that as much. It's just very med-surg based, just like we talked about before. We don't have a cath lab. We just mainly have like surgical patients. The other hospital I float to, it's more neuro. And even this patient that I received a couple of days ago in the ICU for pulmonary hypertension, they had to transfer out via ambulance to another hospital that they're contracted with just to get a left heart catheterization, put a swan in. And then we got the swan back and no one from the staff took it. They gave it to me like as if I have all this CVICU experience. But if you look at my skills checklist, I specifically put 2 out of 5 that I need probably some supervision because I don't personally operate it. But they gave it to me. It's cool. I learned. I had a great resource. The break nurse always kind of came in and helped out. So, yeah, they just don't get things often like that acute.
Yeah, it's real clutch. It's real clutch. I've noticed that this ICU and this hospital in general, it's super medical. In ICU, we haven't been full yet. That we've been here for these couple of weeks now. Like I said, very medical stuff going all over the place. Like for me, a lot of bowel obstructions. I want to say some GI bleeds, some seizure stuff. Of course, CWA, alcohol withdrawal. Like there's basically medical stuff. Like I know one day when I was floated to the step-down unit, I had 2 bowel obstructions and a recovering COVID patient. So this just kind of shows you it. And both bowel obstruction, no bowel sounds. And then I think that one of them started bleeding towards the end of the shift, which his hemoglobin dropped and he started putting out some red output. So it was interesting to see as well.
And one thing I noticed too, being in the West Coast, is there's so much diverse, different dialects that you have to pick up on. So the Chinese culture has Mandarin and Cantonese. Some of your patients, I just had a funny story of what happened. I had this Cantonese guy, barely could speak Chinese, but he kind of had to have a constipation, took his colace and kept pooping, going back and forth, got hemorrhoids because he tried to disimpact them himself, stubborn man. Yeah. But what I wanted to get at is just there's a lot of diversity on the West Coast, so be prepared to use an interpreter a lot more.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the patient that wanted to disimpact themselves, because not pooping and being super constipated in ICU in a hospital sucks. Like people just want to get that out, because if they haven't pooped in 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, so a week, it's just sitting there. And especially if they've been eating, they have bowel sounds, it's so uncomfortable. You just want to get that out of you because you're feeling that pressure. And what's interesting to note, because I had those bowel obstruction patients, is for all you nurses out there that may be new to the field and are kind of new to bowel obstructions, is sometimes your patients come out of surgery with no bowel sounds and an NG tube too low intermittent suction. You don't want to give them any kind of food up until they get bowel sounds. The patient might be 8 times 4 completely fine with it, completely moving, able to walk, but yet they might not have any bowel sounds. So you want he looks from an external perspective, he looks very safe to eat, no aspiration risk, not a big issue with him swallowing or digesting. It's just he's not gonna be able to technically digest anything because no bowel sounds. So just be mindful of that a person that's post-op bowel surgery, like a lap or any kind of really bowel procedure, that those could interfere with your bowel sounds and potentially not having come back right away. So always keep that in mind. The patient might be completely fine. You know he could eat safely, but the fact he has no bowel sounds, he's not going to be able to do the whole digestive process that the GI tract does, and it could ultimately cause like an ileus, or it could cause another obstruction. It could cause a bowel perf. So just be careful for that. Just be very, very, very mindful. Even if they're hypoactive, you should still be kind of iffy. Maybe when they regain some activity, but they're hypoactive, they might start them on like a trickle feed of like maybe 5 mLs an hour or 10 mLs an hour, just to maybe ramp things up. But if they have no bowel sounds, zero, I'm not talking about hypoactive, I'm talking about no bowel sounds, you should never give them any kind of food. Once they become hypoactive, you can maybe start doing like thin liquids, clear liquids probably first, and maybe some tube feedings a little bit later on. But just be very mindful of that because it's very dangerous. You can cause a lot of complications and issues.
Belly surgeries are definitely dangerous.
Not my favorite.
They can get septic very quick, not including the GI bleeds. But I did have a very interesting case in the ICU where we couldn't figure out what was going on. The lady comes in for like sepsis UTI related to that, so septic shock, but it was fine. And that's the same day I had the Swan, so I thought it's going to be a laid back shift with her because she's bedbound, just needs some fluids, typical sepsis. It turns out that they noticed BMs are coming out more in the front. So she had a CT that was out because they think she has like a rectovaginal prolapse. So there's a fistula that's created, which the BM is going into the vaginal area that's causing, hopefully I could say these words on Facebook.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And that was causing UTIs because of stool going there. But that wasn't what my problem was overnight. Overnight, I think they gave her like 4 liters in the ER. But I don't know what was going on. So all of a sudden she required oxygen, started gargling so much where I was suctioning her at least every hour because she was desatting. Oral, towards the end, I just put the trumpet in because I needed just more frequent suctioning, and she was kind of resisting and fighting me. I had respiratory in there. We did ABGs continuously because I'm thinking it could be like an intubation thing. Can't maintain her airway. She was also positive for C19. Didn't add on to the sitch. Tried different things. EKG, that was going on. Couldn't figure out. And then we did some Lasix. After like 8 hours of fighting with this lady's airway, continuously suctioning, having staff help me. Finally, I'm like, hey, doc, you got to come upstairs and check this patient out. And we couldn't figure out what was going on. We couldn't give her BiPAP because she had way too much secretions. Later, we hinted, hey, maybe it's pulmonary edema. We did a chest x-ray. It didn't show anything, but that doesn't mean that there's fluid in the lungs. So we finally put her on pressors because she was hypotensive, gave her some Lasix. And by the last hour of my shift, she completely was changed into a different person. So she could have went into like an acute pulmonary edema because we didn't know her echo.
Yeah,
and we just thought it was airway. Maybe it's like a crashing C19 patient because that's what usually happens. But it was just so weird because the sputum was frothy and just white, and we couldn't put the clinical picture together. Plus, ER doesn't scan the fluid, so if you look at her eyes and nose, it doesn't say that she's 5 liters positive, which doesn't help with the transition of care.
Yeah.
So that was a cluster.
Yeah, that was a cool. That's a cool situation though.
Yeah,
like nursing is interesting because like when you hit it with these patients like that, it's very crazy. But then when you look back at it, you're just like, damn, okay, straight business. Like it's a good experience, but at the time it's stressful. But later on, like you appreciate that you went through the experience and you actually solved the problem.
Yeah, and you just keep on troubleshooting, asking the doctor. You're looking into the chart. Okay, blood cultures. Why is she hypothermic? And you're just like during a code, you're going over H&Ts. You just keep going over what you could figure out that's in the clinical picture. And that's what nursing is fun about, especially critical care, because you're doing less of the tasky stuff and you're kind of being the detective if you have a very sick patient.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of one of my other patient that I had that I remember a little bit about. He was recovering, and then what happened was, so he was intubated, extubated a few times just because shortness of breath, and then he had C19 issues with that, and they had to redrop an NG because he pulled it out, and they ended up dropping into his lung, and he got a pneumo for that. So I remember getting him transferred over to me, and then they had to end up putting a chest tube in, and then there was some issues with his breathing, and then they did an X-ray. And it showed that there's no chest tube that it got pulled. Like the radiologist said that the chest tube has been removed. But then the physician looked at it and you could clearly see the chest tube. So it was like a little bit of an iffy situation because technically the chest tube was there. And when this stuff was going on, he was kind of declining, not for my shit, but for days. The other nurse was giving me a report. And that's why they did the x-ray because of the shortness of breath, a little bit of deoxygenation. So they had him on a water seal. So they didn't have him to suction. So what happened was, I guess he had a little bit of what's it called when it bubbles? Air leak. He had a pretty large air leak, so they had to reconnect him to the suction. Long story short, that's what helped. If your patient gets, like I said, turn off the suction and he starts developing shortness of breath, there starts to be bubbling in a chamber, he looks uncomfortable, starts desatting. The best thing you could do, regardless if there is an order or there isn't, you should hook him back up to wall suction. And that's usually going to balance out the pressures and make him feel a lot better. That's kind of how we gauge if a patient is ready to be, how a patient is ready to have that chest tube pulled out.
And the last thing we just want to talk about is one thing about these ICUs that we're working in between these two hospitals is there's only a hospital. There's no NP or there's no direct connection to the ICU docs unless it's a complete dire emergency. So sometimes talking to the hospitalists, you don't get the best results or they don't want to do something based on the way you are talking to an ICU doctor. So that kind of delays things a little bit. But nevertheless, we're still just vibing out here in California. So the next time we're going to be hanging out in Miami recording this probably because we're working 3 shifts and running around. So we'll record one out there. Maybe we'll put on a cool shirt for the next one.
Yeah, shout out to my music week for all you nurses out there that are going, let's have a good time. But real quick, this is the first time that I've been on MedSurg since, I want to say, Santa Monica. I think I was floated MedSurg once in Santa Monica, and I was floated here to MedSurg too. So that was a cool experience. I had 4 patients. I started off with 3, then I had an admission. They actually transferred me from the step down to the MedSurg unit after 11 o'clock. So I got transferred over there probably to take that admission. So I had 3 patients and then I got an admission. But it was a cool experience. There's very helpful nurses out there, or not out there, but on the unit. So I shout out to them. And this was a different hospital as well. I got floated from Zan to a San Diego location. So it was a different hospital than I was initially contracted to, and it was also a different unit, so it was a cool experience. But I said nurses were great; they're helping me out a lot. Chargers was amazing. Even the nurse that I worked next to was super amazing, super helpful. So it's real cool. It shows you that MedSurg is manageable with 4 patients, and it's a lot better and a lot less stressful than MedSurg in a hospital on a unit that has greater than a 4-to-1 ratio, because you've had a ratio like that and it sucks. The 4 is doable, and I think it's very safe. It's 5. It would be definitely a tough call, because even I could see 4 being too much on MedSurg, but if you throw that 5th person, that's way too much. 4 you could handle, because usually they do it on acuity, and you could usually pair up which quad is heavy. So we're gonna want to even that out. But 5 would be way too much for MedSurg.
Imagine having 6 and getting an admission.
Yeah, that's rough.
Or having those Midwest / Northeast over there ratios, man.
Non-Cali ratios. Yeah, but it's legit. But nonetheless, so far, amazing experience. Even though I've been floating a lot more than I would like, I understand we're disposable. That's why I'm here. I don't mind floating. I know I'm here to help out, and plus it's ratioed, so that's why I'm not complaining. Low key.
You got to come in there, do the work, collect the bag, great patient care, help the hospital, help the nation, and go from there.
Yep, awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in for this debriefing. Like we said, next time in Miami. So woo.
Peace.